Bow to Johnny Arcane by Jim Nail, read by Jim Nail. Chapter 9, Winter in King Corn, Part 3. 3 days later, Polly Mae died. The afterbirth got stuck up inside her and it festered there and poisoned her. The scullery maids, whose names were Misha and Marta, were stricken with grief. "How will we ever bury her?" wailed Marta. "There's no earth anywhere, only snow." "Bury her?" replied Climber. "We're not going to bury her. We're going to eat her." Marta shrieked in horror. Maggie Mender had to lead her out of the shed, or she would have fallen onto the poor cow's carcass. "It's just the way of things, Marta," said Maggie. "We eat goats, we eat pigs." But nobody in King Corna had ever eaten a cow. There was much talk among the townspeople that day. Some said they were going to go into their houses and not come out until it was all over. Birdleg coaxed Misha and Martin into the longhouse, and Climber gathered 4 strong men to lift Polly Mae out of the goat shed and carry her into Tom Cleaver's butcher shop. Johnny followed them there. Tom was curious. He had them spread the cow out on the big marble cutting slab, and he walked around her several times holding a hacksaw, occasionally stopping to place the blade over this crease or that ripple in the flesh, wondering if this was the place to enter. The cow was too big for the slab. Her legs and head dangled over the sides. "She's not built like a pig," he said. "All the meat's going to be on the haunches," Climber informed him. "You got to go in through the flank lines." When the saw broke through the uterine lining, a great stink rose up, the stench of the putrid afterbirth. Several of the men had to leave the room, but Tom just kept on cutting, a man wholly devoted to his craft. It wasn't enough meat to feed the whole town of King Corn. The cooks in the scullery filled a cauldron of water and threw in all the root vegetables and winter greens they could find. They cleaned up Polly Mae's bones and they boiled them for hours so the marrow could permeate the broth. Then they filleted the sinewy muscle from the rump and the round, and chucked up the lean steaks from the ribs, shanks, and loins into palm-sized cubes, and everything was thrown into the pot, except for the kidneys, which had shriveled into something that resembled 2 dried apples. The stew simmered in the cauldron all day, and by late afternoon a strange but alluring aroma was emanating from the log house. People gathered at the door and sniffed. A few came in, but there was still a lot of resistance. When the dinner bell rang, the doors of many houses remained closed, the smoke still rising from the chimneys. Mayor Burleyman stood up before the gathering of courageous diners and made a speech. He praised the cowboys for providing the town with a unique experience, and he praised the townspeople for their hospitality and the assistance they had given the cowboys in this their hour of need. "New ways are coming to King Corn," he said. "This is only the beginning. The world as we know it has been constant for as long as we can remember. Now it is changing. The borders are breaking down. We should not be afraid. We can work together and make things happen. By the time summer comes, there will be running water in every home and dispensary, thanks to our friend Frankie Fulcrum. This is not the future of legends and prophecies. In that future we were helpless, subject to forces we did not understand and could not control. This future is something we can take into our hands and mold as we wish. This future is ours. We can harvest knowledge and we can partake in its fruit. This is only the beginning. A few of the courageous diners whistled, a few stomped their feet. A small chorus in the back of the room shouted, "Burly man," several times, the last two disintegrating into something that sounded more like "burly whirly" or "whirly burl." Obviously, these people did not really get what their mayor was trying to tell them. There was only one common question. What is this stew going to taste like? Later that evening, the musicians gathered on the platform. It was the first time they had played since the cowboys came. Even little Chestnut joined in, banging her tambourine and croaking her joyful sing-song. They had all tasted the meat and decided it was good and that there should be a song written about it. Aunt fiddled through a potpourri of familiar dance tunes, stealing a phrase from this one, a cadence from that, until she had patched together a passable little stovepipe with a key change in the B section. Bear Claw worked up some chords. "What should we call it?" he asked. "Cow in the Kettle," cried Aunt, and the music began. Johnny's eyes frequented the happy crowd, the courageous diners, as the music poured forth. There was a new kind of energy he hadn't felt before. He felt it himself, in his own blood. Mayor Birdieman moved among the crowd, shaking hands, holding court to brief conversations, then moving on to the next, purpose-driven, deliberate. Climber and Birdleg, on their feet in front of the platform, stomped and swayed, a little drunk. They had set aside their corn whiskey and moved on to King Corn's own barley beer, brewed up just months ago in Tiller Hogpen's oaken barrels. But there were those who were conspicuous in their absence. Misha and Marta in the goat shed tended little Johnny the calf, knitting him scarves and booties, stroking and brushing him, tying ribbons to his tail, singing him songs, telling him stories. Frankie Fulcrum holed up in his workshop, mixing chemicals, brooding over the loss of his two favorite scullery maids. And a good half of the townspeople chose to dine at home on the food from their larders, or what they could glean from the dispensary, afraid of this new meat and what it might do to them, or simply resisting it and all that it symbolized, its intrusion into the predictability of their daily lives. Later, Jocko sat talking and drinking beer with the cowboys in a dimly lit corner of the long hall. Johnny was curious about this, and for it was rare for Jocko to sit still for anything long enough to resemble a conversation. So he sat down with them and listened in. "Climber, how many cows do you think there are in the world?" Do you mean the known world or the world? There's a difference, you know. "That's not necessarily true, Climber," Birdleg chipped in. "The known world may be all there is." "Oh, you shut up, Birdleg. You're changing the subject. The boy just wants to know how many cows there are in the world." In the known world, said Jocko, how many cows have you seen? Climber scratched his beard. Well, once we drove 7 cows across the rickety-back bridge. Climber scratched his beard. Well, once we drove 7 cows across the rickety-back bridge. I think that was the most we'd ever seen in one place. Do people always eat cows? Well, people don't generally eat cows. They eat the bulls and the steers. The cows is for the milk. We just ate Polly Mae because we had to, on account of she was dead. What do you see when you're out moving cows around? Do you see mountains? Oh, we stay in the grasslands mostly. That's the point, so the cows can graze. But sometimes we see mountains in the distance. We saw horses one time, said Birdleg. You saw horses, or so you say. I don't think they were horses. I think they were horned pigs. Do you even know what a horse looks like? Birdleg forwarded the question. Do you know what a horse looks like, Jocko? I got a picture of a horse in my room. A mummer at the cornfest drew it. I made a little horse by looking at the picture. What? You made a horse? A little horse. I made him out of mud and dried him in the sun. I like to make little things. Climber made a sniggering noise through his nose. Oh yeah? Well, why don't you just make yourself a little girl sometime and then drop her down your pants? Johnny winced. Jocko was a sensitive boy, especially about his dolls. They were almost a ritual to him, and Johnny feared that he would be offended by this remark. But no, Jocko just laughed. He laughed and laughed. Oh yeah, he said when he was finally able to catch his breath. Well, why don't you just make yourself a little crescent moon smoke salamander, then drop him into your feed bag? Climber scrunched up his face. Huh? But Birdleg got it, or at least he got something. Maybe he was just laughing at Climber's perplexity. His laughter started out like a rhythmic wheeze, but soon it caught his vocal cords and throated into a full-scale cackle with subtle notes of giggle and guffaw. Jocko laughed all the more, and it wasn't long before Johnny was laughing too, although he wasn't quite sure what he was laughing at. A crescent moon smoke salamander, howled Birdleg. Drop it in your feed bag. They laughed and laughed into the night, the three of them. Climber never laughed. He just sipped his beer and then folded his good arm across his bad arm and steeled his face, and after a while you could tell his mind had drifted into other things, and soon he closed his eyes and fell asleep.